As I mentioned on Day 31, Part 1, I'm including a message on Shiphrah and Puah. I hope you find this helpful.
Well, good morning. So we're back to, this is our final week in this series on trust. So I'm glad you're here. When we started this series, In God We Trust, or In Blank We Trust, we started off with this phrase that's on our currency, right? This one. But did you know where it came from? I did some research about this, and there's a kind of cool story behind it. The story is that George Washington was with some folks, and he said to Thomas Jefferson, we should put on our currency, we trust in God. We trust in God. And Thomas Jefferson said, man, that is a great idea. So he turns to the guy who's taking notes and says, hey, did you get that, Yoda? Come on, that is a Star Wars and linguistics jokes all into one. All right. So this question of trust is actually a very important one. It's one we've been talking about for 4 weeks because it does shape how we see the world, how we see relationships, how we make decisions. All of that really comes down to who do you trust? What do you put your trust in? And we started off our series talking about this phrase that's going around a lot. Trust the science. And we said when you dig into that phrase, you find out that it's not really accurate. In fact, science has never been about trust at all, the opposite of it. Science is about exploration, asking questions, verifying results in repeatable ways. We said that science came out of the church so that people could look at God's world and investigate it and explore it to learn more about the God who created it. That was the purpose of science originally. We took that kind of universal view and we kind of narrowed it down and said, okay, well, if we can see the fingerprints of God in creation, how do we get to the God who created it? How do we go from what is seen in the world to what is unseen? How do we make that leap, that bridge? And we said part of it is your story. There is a reasonableness to trusting God. We gave some examples of that, but the biggest one is your experience with God and being trustworthy and having integrity and honesty in sharing that story with other people. Because sometimes your story is the bridge for them to hearing about God, your evidence of the continuing story of God. And then last week, we brought that even further closer to us and said, okay, well, if I've made that leap to trust God, how do I learn what God wants from me? I mean, I'm part of the creation. I'm part of the show. How do I know what the one who made the show, who made everything, wants? Because I'm in it. I can't see beyond it. So how do I know that? Well, God comes to us by what we call revelation. And it takes many different forms, revelation, dreams, visions, experiences. But one that we can share together as a community is the scriptures, is the Bible. Right? We can share it together in a small group, for example, or in this room, and also throughout history. We can look back to what others read and thought and taught about this revelation from God. And so we have that to help us as well, to be inspired readers. So today, I want to take it even closer down to you and me. And the question today is a bit different. It's a bit more personal. And that's this question. Can hope be trusted? That sounds kind of weird, but if you think about it, when it gets personal, like what do you hope for? Not just beyond this world, but I'm talking about in this world. Can you trust in hope? Because sometimes the world might seem dark or difficult. You're like, where is hope for the future? Or maybe for you, it's just the daily grind. You know, you get up in the morning, grab a cup of coffee, you go to work or go to the office, go into the field, or you're working from home and you're taking care of the kids and the family, and you pour all day into your work. And then you get done, You come home, fight the traffic maybe, have dinner, take care of kids' homework, whatever's going on like that, your bills, and then it's off to bed, and then what happens? Turn the crank, and it happens all over again. It's just like you're grinding away. You're like, well, okay, where's the hope in that for my future? Or maybe you look at your creativity, and you think, man, this is being wasted. Or the world around you, and you say, I just don't see justice and truth and honesty anymore. Where's the hope? When we ask those questions of hope, we think, can I even trust in hope on this side of heaven? Well, today we're going to look at two characters from the Bible that are often overlooked. But I will say to you, this is probably one of my top 5 stories in the Bible. Top 5 of my favorite stories from the Bible. I thought today, since we talked about Scripture, let's do some little Bible study on this topic. And so we're going to look in the first chapter of the second book of the Bible, the book of Exodus. And so when I say Exodus, who is like the main hero of Exodus? Moses, right? So you have this great story of freedom and deliverance and a new people and a new nation and all this kind of stuff. But before all of that, before we have burning bushes or splitting seas or a fallen Pharaoh, before all that happens, we're going to have this story of 2 people that are virtually kind of overlooked in the story of the Exodus. But I think that they're core to Exodus. So let's just jump into the story. Exodus chapter 1, verse 8 says this. Now a new king arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph. That's a terrifying phrase. See, Exodus is picking up where Genesis left off. Where Genesis left off is Jacob, the grandson of Abraham, is taking the family, 70 people in all, down out of what was Canaan, Israel, into Egypt to a nice, awesome place called Goshen. Now, why did he do that? Well, it's because his son, his 11th son, named Joseph, it's a long story, but Joseph comes to power by trusting God and doing what God wanted him to do. He comes to power to be second in the nation of Egypt. And in that position of number 2 in Egypt, he actually saves all of Egypt from a 7-year famine. And not just all of Egypt, the whole region Joseph saves by simply trusting God, and doing his job and doing it well. So he saves the known world at the time. And so they bring the family down into this beautiful, beautiful area. And then this phrase. See, 400 years have passed, which, by the way, is a long time. The United States has not been around for 400 years. Well, 400 years has passed, and this new Pharaoh comes to power who forgot everything that Joseph did. New sheriff in town. And all that Joseph's good works are kind of lost in the sands of the desert. And this Pharaoh also sees that God's been blessing the Hebrew people. And they're getting numerous. And a lot of people are getting up there. And he's like, oh, this is not good. Because there's so many of them that they can partner with our enemies and outnumber us. And that creates fear in Pharaoh. Now, we quoted Yoda earlier. Let's just quote him again. Fear leads to anger. You heard this, right? Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. You can say it in Yoda's voice if you want. I almost hear like Yoda. Okay, so you have this, and he's right. He's one of the few well-written lines of Star Wars. But, with this whole thing that fear leads to suffering. And what happens is Pharaoh becomes afraid, he gets angry, and this is going to lead to suffering for the Hebrew people. So this is what happens. Verse 13 of Exodus 1. The Egyptians became ruthless in imposing tasks on the Israelites and made their lives bitter with hard service in mortar and brick and in every kind of field labor. They were ruthless in all the tasks that they imposed on them. Do you notice that ruthless was mentioned twice? Like some point, we don't know when in the 400 years, but at some point in that 400 years, Pharaoh says, I want you to build my cities of Pithom and Ramses. And he puts them to work and he makes them into slaves. But yet they kept on growing. It's almost like as they grew, so did their oppression, right? So did Pharaoh's fear. So does his sufferings on the people. And what could the Hebrew people do? Like literally, they were powerless. At this point in Egyptian history, this is the height of Egypt's power. The pyramids had been around for 1,000 years. So what are these Hebrew slaves going to do about it? They need a deliverer. They need someone from the outside to come in and do something if they're going to have any hope for the future. And I think that is a great definition of deliverance for us too. When your power seems so small and your problem is so big, you're like, there is no way I can deal with that. I need some help from the outside. You been there? Maybe it's something from the outside of you, something like a Pharaoh. Maybe it's an illness or a coworker who's got it out for you or something going on out here. And you're like, man, I am so small, so powerless. I need God to do something. I need a deliverer to come and fix this because there's no way I can. Or more likely in our world, we are the problem. It's internal. Maybe it's a habit or an addiction or some behavior that you just can't quit doing over again. Like you don't want to do it. You know that, but you're like, you keep doing it. And you're like, okay, I need help. Like I can't fix this on my own. I am too weak to overcome this powerful thing. I need deliverance. So how are the Hebrew people going to find deliverance? Because ironically, as they grow, so does Pharaoh's fear, and it's getting worse and worse. And Pharaoh becomes so afraid, by the way, that he does something unthinkable. Verse 15, the king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, one of whom named Shiphrah, the other Puah. Now notice first off that we get their names, not Pharaoh's name. Most powerful guy in the world, don't know his name, but we know these two slave midwives. Pretty cool, right? But look at her name, Shiphrah. Her name is from the Hebrew word shafar, which means to be beautiful. Great. Puah, we're not sure. We think it means fragrant, which is, I guess, better than stinky, but her name's maybe fragrant, we're not sure. But I got a better thing for how I think of her. Okay, we're going to play pretend for a minute. Play pretend for a minute. Pull out your phone if you don't already have it out. And open your text program. Let's pretend that you're back in this day and your wife is pregnant or you're pregnant and all is about to happen, it's about to come, to fruition, and you need to get a midwife. So you're gonna Puah's on call. So you're gonna text Puah. Again, we're pretending. So hang in there, right? I want you to type in Puah and hit space. Does it autocorrect? What does it autocorrect to? Push. I love that. Isn't that perfect? Like, what a better autocorrect for that name than push. So I think of Shiphrah and Push, right? That's kind of what's going on. Okay, so these are the two midwives, right? We got their names. But what they're asked to do is evil and unthinkable. The king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was named Shiphrah, the other Puah, when you act as midwives to the Hebrew women and see them on the birth stool, if it is a boy, kill him. But if it's a girl, she shall live. The most powerful person in the known world calls them in and gives them this unthinkable command. Their job was to deliver babies, not kill them. And so Shiphrah and Puah need deliverance. Yeah? The Hebrew babies, the males, needed deliverance. The Hebrew people needed deliverance. In fact, the entire future of the Israelite nation needed deliverance. They needed hope for their actual, literal future. They needed a deliverer. And guess who's not around yet? There's no Moses yet. He's not around yet. So who is going to stand up to this cowardly Pharaoh? In fact, in Exodus, God hasn't shown up yet. From what we can tell, there's no communication. There's no plan from God. God's not even mentioned yet in the book of Exodus. So there's no plan for deliverance, no message, nothing. It's like literally silence from God. And it seems hopeless. So what are Shiphrah and Puah going to do? I mean, it's dangerous for them, incredibly dangerous for them. Are they going to melt into the background and just like, man, I just got to go along and like, save my life or protect my family? Let someone else handle the deliverance. Let God take care of this. Verse 17. But the midwives feared God. They did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them, but they let the boys live. Well, so first off, they're like, hey, you know what? Pharaoh's powerful, but we answer to a more powerful God. Our ultimate allegiance is to God. That's who we are. That's where our trust is, yeah? That's where our hope is in God. That's first. I don't care what this Pharaoh says. I'm anchoring my hope and trusting my hope for the future in God, even though we haven't heard from him. And there's something else that's pretty important for us today. You notice that their act of defiance to Pharaoh, their act of faith to Pharaoh, isn't based on some special message. There's no burning bush. There's no plagues. They simply go about doing their job. In fact, it may not look like deliverance, what they're doing for the nation. We don't know what it looks like. It looks like they're delivering babies. But they do their job in honoring God and being faithful to what God has given them to do in the moment. Their daily grind is delivering babies, and they're going to do that faithfully for God. So maybe that is what deliverance looks like in our lives. There's these pharaohs that seem so powerful, and we're just slaves, and maybe we just make excuses. You notice, by the way, that the Shiphrah and Puah don't make excuses? You don't hear them making excuses in the story, do you? Who makes excuses in the book of Exodus? Moses does. When God calls Moses to the burning bush, he gives at least 7 excuses of why he can't do it. Not these 2. In the book of Judges, Gideon is asked to rise up a nation, and he makes excuses. Not these 2. They simply put their trust in God, have courage and fortitude in the middle of the daily grind, doing their jobs, and they do it with faithfulness and trust and hope in the future. They went on with their daily jobs. They went on delivering babies and trusted that God would deliver them. That's what it comes down to. So, by the way, Pharaoh, the great and powerful Pharaoh, finds out that these 2, Shiphrah and Puah, have not obeyed him. The babies are still alive. Verse 18. So the king of Egypt summoned the midwives and said to them, why have you done this? Why and allowed the boys to live? There is a lot in that verse, a ton in that verse. The first thing is, why don't Shiphrah and Puah run? Hey, Pharaoh has summoned you. He's out for you. Why didn't they just take off and run? Moses did that. Remember that? Pharaoh was after Moses. What did he do? Boom, takes off to Midian and spends 40 years hiding out in the desert. Not these 2. That's the first question. The second thing I have to ask is, why does he call them in? Did you catch that? Like, he's Pharaoh. They're nobodies. They're less than nobodies. Why not just have them killed? I mean, not to be kind of crass about it, but if you're Pharaoh and you answer to nobody, just be like, just dispatch of them now, right? They disobeyed me. Doesn't do that. Which is another question for me. Why does he even involve them in the first place? If he wanted to kill the male babies of the Hebrews before they even had their first breath, well, if you want to do that, just send your soldiers to do it. What are they going to do? Not going to stop you. Why involve them in the first place? I think the answer, for me anyway, is pretty simple. I think he knew it was wrong. I think he knew what he was doing by killing these innocent children was wrong and immoral. and you want to keep his hands clean. In fact, you want to keep all of Egyptians' hands clean and let them do it. And that happens a lot in our world today too. And so what is Shiphrah and Puah going to do? Well, I guess in my mind, I imagine them walking in to see Pharaoh. And which has got to be like intimidating, right? You're walking in as these two slaves to all this magnificence. Egypt at its height, marble statues and this massive palace. And I don't know where they're at in the palace, but they go in and Pharaoh's got to be there with, guards and security and I don't know, an entourage. And here they come walking in their slaves' clothing. What are they going to say to Pharaoh? Well, we have it in verse 19. So he says, why have you done this, right? Pharaoh says, why'd you do this? The midwives said to Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, for they are vigorous and give birth before the midwives come to them. If there was ever a mic drop moment, this is it. Like, imagine, they walk in, like, you want to see us? Oh, the reason why we didn't do it, because the Hebrew women, super tough, man. They're having babies, boom, 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 boom. But your women, like your wife over there, weak. They can't handle that, man. I mean, how, they not only do they go and show up, but they like kind of poke Pharaoh. Like of all things, like, yeah, like, can you imagine if his wife was there, Pharaoh's wife? She's like, you gonna say something? You're like, you mean like, it's amazing. They just are just, boom, courage, fortitude, strength. They know what they believe. They know where their trust is, and they just take it to Pharaoh. And what does the great and powerful Pharaoh do about it? Absolutely nothing. Nothing. They step to Pharaoh, and they call out fear as a weakling and a bully. And Pharaoh does nothing. But God does. This is the first time that God shows up in the book of Exodus. Verse 20. So God dealt with the midwives, and the people multiplied and became very strong. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families. God blessed them. Because they put God first above their fears, because they showed trust in hope in God, God blessed them. And they did that by simply doing their job. By doing their job where they were, in the situation they were in, no special training, no special call from God. They just did their job and delivered a nation, literally. In fact, Paul, we've been talking about the last few weeks, in his letter to the Colossian church, says this: whatever your task, put yourselves into it as done for the Lord and not for your masters. That kind of speaks to us today. Just like they did their job and they did it well, faithfully to God, we're the same way. What we do, that daily grind that we're like, man, where's the hope in this? The hope is in it. That daily grind is in you. How you do your work, the quality of your work, the hope you put into your work, the spirit, the determination, the courage. How do you take care of your coworkers, your employees, your customers? All of that can bring hope and encouragement. You can actually bring deliverance to people right in the work you're doing. Because we don't do it for a paycheck. We don't do our work just to get by and pay the bills. We do our work as if God called us to do that work, because God does, in the spirit by which we do the work. And something else, by the way, about Shiphrah and Puah, like I said, they bring deliverance by delivering babies. But you notice that if it wasn't for them, there might not have been a Moses. If they didn't take courage and deliver those babies, maybe Moses was one of them. And they delivered the deliverer by simply doing their jobs in the situation that they were in, doing what they knew. And the final lesson from Shiphrah and Puah, like I said, is hope. Do you think about the Hebrew people, like the ones who are doing the work of building Pithom and Ramses, who are sitting there every day in the hot sun, making bricks, bent over, suffering, looking, they stand up, right? They stretch their backs, look to the horizon and they may say, where's the hope in this? I'm a slave, building somebody else's cities. Where's the hope for my future? Where's the hope for my kids or my grandkids' future? Maybe you go from asking, when will God come and deliver me, to will God ever come to deliver me? And then this story of Shiphrah and Puah, two people who simply do their job and deliver a nation by doing it with the spirit and encouragement and fortitude that it takes to change the world. And that may be for us too. Maybe we look at our lives and say, gosh, it seems so unfair, or the world seems out of control, or trust has been broken in my life, or I don't see justice, it's been forgotten. Where do I find hope? We too need faithful witnesses who have seen hope, who know that hope is still alive and can share that with us. Witnesses who have the courage and the faithfulness to have hope in the daily grind and can see beyond the immediate to what God is doing in our world and in your lives, in our lives together. We need witnesses who trust in hope, like Shiphrah and Puah, who expose fear and anger for what it is, a bully and a coward. So is hope still alive in your story? Who do you look to for encouragement and for hope? Who has walked through that darkness and come up to the side and says, yes, there's hope? Who is that in your life? Find someone like that. Or better yet, the question is, who are you pouring into? Who are you giving hope and encouragement to? Who are you giving the encouragement to trust in hope in the future? Ken Blanchard was a kind of a speaker, but also did a lot of frontline training for stores and retailers. And one of his associates was named Barbara. And she was doing a seminar for about 1,000 or 3,000 like frontline grocery store workers. One of those workers was named Johnny. And Johnny was 19, had Down's syndrome, and he was a bagger. And he went home from this speech and was like, gosh, I really want to do something with what I learned. And didn't know what. So he talked with his dad, and they had an idea together, okay? So they sat down and they wrote out encouraging notes, about 6 per page, printed 50 pages on the computer. So he had 300 of these encouraging notes that they would cut apart. Some they would make up themselves, some they would get from a book, but Johnny would then sign every single one of them and say, I hope this encourages your day. Right? All of them, all 300, every single night. And then the next day he would go to work, his job, and when he bagged the groceries, he put one of these little notes in the last bag of groceries and say, hey, there's a note in there for you, something special. Hope it encourages your day. And he did this every day. 300 of them. About a month and a half later, Barbara got a letter from the manager of the store that Johnny worked at. And it said, you don't believe this, but what you taught, Johnny took to heart. And it's changed our store. He said, we have like 8 or 9, aisle for checking out. One of them has a line to the back of the store. And we're like, hey, come to this other line. Like, no, we want to get Johnny's note. Some people would go to a good store once a week, started coming like every other day, just to get that encouraging note from Johnny. And then that transformed to other departments in the store, like the floral department. Instead of throwing away flowers that were broken or damaged or corsages, they went out into the floor and gave them to people that needed maybe a little lift for the day. It changed the culture of our store. There's Johnny, doing his job, doing it well, showing compassion, taking interest. Think what you can do in your job, in your world, in your situation by just showing the trust you have in God, the hope you have in God for the future, and being that voice of encouragement. You see, trust and hope aren't set on some different time and place. Hope and trust aren't just for the difficult times. A trustworthy life is lived in the midst of everyday life as we celebrate together the days that we've been given.
Thank you again for joining us today. Until next time, stay on the trail.